Did you know that some of the earliest films made in Africa were actively suppressed by colonial powers? This is the story of how African cinema emerged from the shadows of empire, becoming a powerful tool for reclaiming history and identity. From the silent era to the modern day, African filmmakers have grappled with the legacies of colonialism, the memories of ancient empires, and the challenge of telling their own stories on screen. Our journey begins in the late 19th century, with the dawn of cinema itself. Just as the Lumiere brothers were captivating audiences in Europe, so too was the magic of moving pictures arriving in Africa. Alexandria, Egypt, became an early hub, hosting some of the first public film screenings on the continent. By the early 20th century, Egypt was producing its own feature films, including what is widely considered the first African feature-length narrative film, Layla. This burgeoning film industry, however, would soon face the constraints of colonial rule. In southern Africa, cinema became a tool of control. Mining companies and colonial officials used film screenings in mining compounds to manage and indoctrinate African laborers. Hollywood westerns and newsreels were carefully curated and censored, reinforcing colonial narratives and suppressing dissent. It wasn't just about entertainment, it was about shaping perceptions and maintaining power. One source claimed, "Every foot of these films is censored by us," a chilling reminder of the extent of colonial control. The Bantu Educational Kinematographic Experiment, or BEC, was designed partly to restrict commercial film circulation and functioned as proactive censorship. But even under these oppressive conditions, African audiences were not passive consumers. Research has shown that African mine workers and viewers actively interpreted the films they watched, finding their own meanings and challenging colonial narratives. The figure of the cowboy, for example, became a malleable symbol through which African viewers negotiated masculinity, labor, resistance, and violence. This shows the cowboy in African cinema history is not just an imported genre but part of African social imagination. The early years of African cinema are also marked by loss and suppression. A film made in Madagascar in 1947, believed to have addressed a colonial massacre, reportedly disappeared during colonization. Scholars suspect it was destroyed by colonial authorities, a stark example of the erasure of African historical cinema. Despite these challenges, early filmmakers like Donald Swanson, working in South Africa, created films that centered black urban experiences. His film, African Jim, was a notable exception in an industry dominated by white narratives. His work, while important, exists at the intersection of representation and colonial ideology. The dawn of African independence in the 1960s ushered in a new era for cinema. Film became a central tool for nation-building and anti-colonial identity. Filmmakers sought to reclaim their history and challenge colonial stereotypes. Ousmane Sembène, a Senegalese writer and director, emerged as a leading figure in this movement. His films, such as Mandobi, Lonwada, Zela, and Sedo, critiqued colonialism, corruption, and social inequality. Sembène established a model of cinema as historical critique. His films helped establish African cinema as anti-colonial, politically self-reflective, historically conscious, and committed to audience critique, not just spectacle. He was one of the first to make films in African languages, grounding his work in the lived experiences of his people. Sedo, in particular, portrays resistance to the combined pressures of Islam, Christianity, and slavery, becoming a politically controversial film. Sembène's work paved the way for a new generation of African filmmakers who explored themes of identity, memory, and resistance. Djibril Diop Mambéty's Tuki Buki, a landmark in modern African cinema, offered a radical and experimental vision of post-colonial Africa. The Festival Pan-Africain du Cinéma de Ouagadougou, or FESPACO, founded in 1970, became the major continental showcase for African cinema. FESPACO became a durable platform for African filmmakers, African language cinema, continental distribution networks, and Pan-African cultural legitimacy. It provided a vital platform for African filmmakers to connect, share their work, and build a Pan-African film culture. As African cinema has evolved, it has continued to grapple with the legacies of empire and the challenge of representing African history on screen. Films about African kingdoms and empires have become a powerful means of reclaiming the past and challenging colonial narratives. Ancient Egypt, the Mali Empire under Sundiata Keita and Mansour Musa, the Songhai Empire with its centers like Gao and Timbuktu, the Aksumite Empire, the Kanambonu Empire, Great Zimbabwe, the Benin Kingdom, the Asante Empire, and the Zulu Kingdom all have found their way onto the screen, reinterpreted through African eyes. These films seek to recover African political agency, challenge colonial stereotypes of statelessness, show that pre-colonial Africa had sophisticated institutions, and connect past domination to present political struggles. The question at the heart of African empire narratives in cinema is African history told as a European archive, or as African memory and interpretation? African cinema has become a vital tool for shaping how these empires are remembered, challenging Western-centric perspectives, and celebrating the rich and diverse history of the African continent. The story of African cinema is a story of resilience, resistance, and the power of storytelling. It is a story of how a continent reclaimed its narrative, one film at a time.